again, Sheila. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. How is lockdown treating you?
I've been busy actually with queries, so that's been nice in a way, and I've been educated with how to work at home. So I think that's also a positive, and hopefully a positive that a lot of people are picking up, because as much as some businesses I know must be really struggling, and if you are, please go and apply for your grants because the emails are coming out right now. But a lot of other businesses, which we might not have expected would be open to their employees working from home, are suddenly getting used to that possibility. So even the court system are trialing video. I think I might have told you last time. And I did a mediation yesterday, a judicial mediation with the Employment Tribunal on Microsoft Teams.
Oh, wow.
And that worked really well. Yeah. So, and I found it much more efficient to work that way, as did my client, who was an estate agent and very happy to not be in a courtroom dealing with that. So there are some benefits, I think.
Well, that's exciting in a way. I think it will have an impact on the way we work in the future. I read something about how a lot of people will ask to work from home 1 to 2 days a week, because it's now possible.
Yes,
harnessing technology. We had a chat on the 9th of May, I believe, and the day after, Boris dropped a bit of a bombshell.
He did.
And
not the one that I was expecting, I'll be honest. But
no, I think not many people were expecting it. So I guess today's conversation is about navigating those changes. And I guess we've got three things to deal with. One, whether it's affected furlough and redundancy in any way. Two, what the guidance is for working in a work environment, in a normal work environment for those companies that decide to go back, and what the rights of employees are in the instance that they don't feel safe. So maybe we can go through each of those things in turn. So first of all, has there been any change on the furlough or redundancy side, or does that pretty much stay the same?
Well, redundancy would stay the same. So all the rules that I talked about still apply. I think what I suggested for selection for furlough still applies as well, if you haven't chosen to do that. The government are obviously looking at winding that scheme down. So, at the moment, you're still eligible and you can still get your 80%. They're then going to wind that down to, well, what I heard was they're winding it down to 60%. But I'm not sure when, and they haven't done it yet. So, I mean, these are plans that have been outlined, and I suppose the public needs to be, will be kept posted as to when that all happens. But I think at the moment, certainly HMRC are very, very busy dealing with the grants, and I don't think the government can afford to do it very much longer. So, it's not going to be unlimited support.
The figures seem to be quite high from what I've been looking at. But they have said, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Rishi Sunak said that he was looking at extending the scheme until October, but we don't know at what percentage. Is that
correct? I think it's going to go down to 60% first, and then but I haven't had exact confirmation of what those dates are, or exactly, but I know that that's what's being talked about.
Okay. So on furlough and redundancy, as it stands, everything similar to what we talked about before, if not the same.
Yeah. The redundancy rules haven't changed. And I think this is really important to remember now. None of the tribunal time limits or the laws have changed. I've been asked about this as well. And as much as people are enthusiastic about consultation on those subjects, none of that has been affected.
Okay. So then this new guidance dropped, and I believe it's a big 50-page document.
It is. I have it in front of me, and I've had the pleasure of reading it.
So you can possibly educate us on its contents. Firstly, I guess, in terms of what it means for employers who are requesting or feel they can bring employees back into the workspace. So what does it say?
Well, unfortunately for employers, the guidance on employment is very limited. So even though the whole document's 50 pages, the guidance for workplaces is around 3 paragraphs long. And it essentially, unfortunately for someone like me that has to advise on these subjects, doesn't give very much detail beyond what Boris Johnson said in his speech. So in summary is, if you can't go to work, or if you can't work from home, you're now encouraged to go to work. If you can work from home, please do work from home. And this excludes the hospitality industry, and it also excludes non-essential retail, is how it's put in the guidance. So if you are in hospitality or non-essential retail, you do not go to work. And you are not to be open right now. Right. If you are any other business that cannot work from home, you are now allowed to be open.
Right. And there's no further guidance on how that workspace should be kept safe or any of those elements, or is there some hint of it?
It says, let's see. For the foreseeable future, workers should continue to work from home rather than their normal physical workplace wherever possible. So what I would say to our Smiley employers, the government have actually been asked a lot of questions to clarify exactly what this means. And, you know, I think the kind, humane thing to do is just, you know, implement that. If you can have staff work from home, please take care of them. Please let them work from home right now, because that is what the guidance is saying. Now, I appreciate that there are lots of businesses that maybe can't, and, you know, these workers are being encouraged to go into work. I don't think there's any suitable health and safety guidance here other than the general health and safety guidance that we all have. So, you know, any of the health and safety rules that you usually have still apply. Social distancing, obviously, or what we call physical distancing. I don't really like the term social distancing, but no, being physically distant, obviously you need to implement that in your workplace and make sure that it's safe as possible. The government were asked for guidance also, and they didn't answer it in this document, and disappointingly they didn't answer it on television either. But I remember in our last interview we had a question from a cleaner that said, I'm really worried about contracting COVID-19 by going into my workplace. Can I refuse to go? So at the time I said yes, you can. Dominic Raab, I believe, was asked this question twice on BBC Breakfast, and unfortunately didn't give an answer to that question about whether an employee is scared to go to work, should they be allowed to not go to work. The most he said was, we have to work together, and employers and employees need to work together to make a decision. So it makes it very difficult for an advisor to say what the government's position is when that is the extent of the detail that the government have given us. So, you know, what can I say other than, you know, you must implement health and safety. You must take care of your employees as much as you can. And beyond that, I mean, in fairness to the government, obviously we're in very new territory here, which no one has dealt with, and they're legislating for a lot of different things. So it's not just workplaces. This 50 pages also covers school. It covers, you know, plans that they may or may not implement about how we're going to see our families, and all sorts of things like that. So, you know, that they've unfortunately devoted a very limited amount of space to the world of employment law.
Which is quite concerning, because a lot of people have already started going back to work.
Indeed.
But I think your question about the cleaner that we touched on last week and have now readdressed brings us on nicely, I guess, to talk about what employee rights are at this point in time. So I know this week there's been a lot of coverage, particularly pertaining to women who are pregnant and not feeling comfortable about going back into the workplace, being pressurized or forced to go back. I'm not sure that there's much guidance on that, but what would your advice be in that situation?
Well, the original guidance was in relation to vulnerable categories, and pregnant women were one of those categories that should not be going out. So, you know, I don't know any exact circumstances at the moment, but potentially if you did feel unsafe and you were being pressured, you know, there may be some mileage for you to say, it's not safe from a health and safety perspective. There might be some discrimination elements going on. Obviously, as a pregnant woman, you are in a protected category. I should add this, the government guidance also does say if you are showing any symptoms at all, you shouldn't go to work. You must stay home. So even if you're feeling, I suppose, okay-ish, but you've got a bit of a cough, I would say that completely qualifies you to stay home. And I think as individuals, it's a difficult one. I think now we really need to make our own decisions to take care of ourselves. And, you know, in terms of one of my values, I'd put that first. If your employer's got a problem with it, there are lots of different ways that an employer can have a problem. So, you know, I'd address those on a case-by-case basis, but the guidance is extremely limited.
So I guess the first thing is to try and have that conversation that we were talking about before. I suppose that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, given, well, it's been said that employers and employees need to work together and come up with pragmatic solutions, I believe are the words of some of our politicians. So in the first instance, let's try and do that. You know.
It's hard because I think a lot of the responsibilities being sort of devolved to the employers themselves.
Indeed.
I'm not going to make too many remarks on the scientific side of things. Suffice to say that despite someone not having symptoms, they can still be a carrier of COVID.
Yes.
Something I suppose all employers should still bear in mind, regardless of whether the government's saying if you have symptoms, that's a reason not to go to work. There's also clear social distancing things, I suppose, that should be implemented from a scientific perspective.
From a scientific perspective, in every workplace, please make sure that your workplace is safe if you're requiring people to go back. I will also add that I know that they've extended the category of people that are entitled to the test as well. So now I think it's anyone over the age of 5 that's showing symptoms has the right to be tested and can apply for those tests. So, you know, do that as well.
So I think it's testing, distancing and disinfecting, I suppose.
Testing, distancing, disinfecting. And I think the summary for me is really take care of each other. We have to. You know, I don't really want to make any comments on the government's guidance necessarily, but you know, no matter what I think about it, I think, you know, us taking care of each other is so vitally important right now.
I think that's excellent advice. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
I think given that the 50-page document from our perspective can be distilled into 3 short paragraphs, we can probably...
Only on the workplace. I mean, if you want to, if we wanted to talk about schools or social bubbles, that's other pages.
Yeah, but on the workplace front, given that it can be distilled to that amount, I think we've covered probably most of what we can. And yes, I guess we just keep our eyes peeled for any more information that comes our way.
Indeed. And I mean, certainly someone like me is paying close attention to what some of our politicians are saying in interviews, because they are always asked these nuanced questions on TV, on Prime Minister's questions. So, you know, there may always be some further clarifications, but when I was keeping my eye out specifically for those sorts of questions, those were the kinds of answers that were coming up.
I suppose there's perhaps one question, and I don't know if there's anything on the guidance about it, and it might be under the transport element, but in terms of people going to work, I know Boris said people should attempt not to transport, and there wasn't much more than that. And then there was discussion about trying to stagger times, with regard to travel and going to work. Is there anything further about that, or how that would work, or has that just been sort of left out there in the ether for people to interpret?
There is some guidance on travel in this document. Again, I've got this in front of me. That guidance extends to 3 paragraphs. So you must travel by bike, by car, or on foot. Public transport, it says, takes a significant number of people to work in urban centres. And they just say the government is working with public transport, to make this better in terms of social distancing. But also, I think, in the announcement, Boris Johnson said, if you can drive, walk, or take the bike, please do that. Congestion charge came back this week. It came back yesterday, actually, and is going up on June 22nd, and the hours are being extended. So yes. I don't know, just from my perspective, there appears to be some quite grave conflicts there in the advice that's been given, but there we have it.
I would agree with that. I think there is, however, some discussion happening about increasing the amount of cycle routes in central London, and correct. I'm not sure it will happen by June, but it...
No. I think that's one of the reasons why, they're closing off, in fact, some parts of London to increase those cycle routes to really encourage people to go by bike. So I guess if you can go by bike or you can walk, those are the preferred options that the government is suggesting. I appreciate for some people that's impractical. And so if you can continue to use the car in those circumstances, that's been Boris Johnson's advice. Although, yes, it's become more expensive to do so. Although the price increase doesn't actually take effect until the 22nd of June, and the extension of hours doesn't take effect until that date either.
And so there's a month to sort of figure things out, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, great.
Sorry, I wish I could be more helpful, but that's
no, I think you have been, as helpful as you can be. And I think it's, I guess, about exercising. They talk about the good British common sense, but just exercising common sense and thinking about being as safe as possible with all the knowledge that we do have from a scientific perspective of the illness, and taking it from there, and taking responsibility as an employer and having those discussions as an employee, I suppose.
Absolutely. I think we can, as the Smiley community, set a really good example, hopefully, on how we want to treat our employees. And, I'd love to see that. And if you don't have a choice on, keeping your business closed and wanting to get your employees into work, just dealing with their concerns sensitively. If it is a pregnant lady, for example, could she take her maternity leave early? Potentially. Could there be some other way that you could engineer it so that she doesn't have to come in because she was originally a vulnerable category? Rather than putting this pressure on her, what kind of person do you want to be? That's kind of what I'd be asking myself as an employer. And I appreciate we are all in difficult financial times as well. As an employee, I'd say things happen in life, and I have these conversations with employees every day. Sometimes, it's not the easiest circumstances right now. You don't necessarily want to lose your job, but you also need to balance that with keeping yourself safe. And if you are being required to go to an environment that you feel unsafe, there may be other ways that you can deal with that and get some more specialised legal advice on it. The challenge that I would have advising those specific scenarios is, one, we don't really have a specific scenario to look at right now. And two, even for the court, this is new. We've never had in our lifetimes anyway, a shutdown in the UK and a virus and these kinds of excuses. So the court are also going to be looking at new territory. And, you know, with cases in the past, we've got guidance of someone that's been in a similar situation, or the ways in which these laws have been created in the past to have a precedent to be able to advise from. We are very much in uncharted territory right now. So, you know, bearing that in mind, there are no guarantees I can give you. However, there may be a way forward depending on your circumstances.
Well, thank you so much, Sheila. It's always lovely to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you so much, and I'm sure everyone will find this as useful as the other video.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.